Addiction. Addiction doesn't care who you are, where you come from, who your mom and dad are, what side of the tracks you grew up on. If you are an addict and you get into your disease of addiction, it'll grab you and it'll never let you go until you find a program recovery or program recovery finds you. But it usually takes a big event for an addict to come to Jesus away, because that's what addicts do. We give things away. Addicts give up their goals to meet their behaviors. Normal people, focused people, successful people give up their behaviors to meet their goals. Get rid of my resentments, man. These resentments are the things that really hold people back. Resentment, the opposite of resentment is forgiveness. And we have to try to find ways to forgive everybody for everything they've done, everything we resent. And we got to try to find the role that we play in all of our problems. Because, hey, do I owe someone forgiveness? Because that forgiveness thing, that's where it's at. Because if I've got to be prepared to forgive everybody for everything they do against me, especially the ones that don't ask for it. Because if I don't do that, John, I'm taking yesterday's trash into tomorrow. Yeah. Now I've just cluttered up a new day with yesterday's trash, and I don't want to do that, man.
Make your escape.
Hey, welcome back to another episode. You are here. You are in the right place at Last in Line Leadership Podcast, where you will be encouraged and inspired to walk in the fullness of the leader you are called to be. This is a place where you will hear about the goodness of God and the hope found in His promises to us. My prayer is that you will be empowered as a servant leader from what you hear in this episode of Last in Line Leadership. Gotta say, I'm real excited today to bring you our guest. We have the one and only Damon West, who is part of the John Gordon team of speakers and authors. He came up with or wrote the book called The Change Agent, how a former college QB sentenced to life in prison transformed his world. Talks about him being sentenced to a maximum security prison here in Texas. Got charged with some burglary and drug usage, possession, those kinds of things. So he got put in to the most dangerous of dangerous situations. And he, wasn't always in that situation. He was a successful stockbroker. He was a D1 quarterback in football. Had a lot going for him, worked in the United States Congress, and then just got mixed up with some bad folks, got addicted to methamphetamine, and the rest is kind of history, so to speak. That's where his life changed, and he met somebody in the Dallas County Jail who we'll call Mr. Jackson, and Damon talks about him. You may have heard about him, but he taught Damon the theory and the concept of being a coffee bean. And I'll let Damon tell you about it, but you guys know what the coffee bean stands for. He has spoken to huge corporations, Walmart, AIG, Chick-fil-A, Southwest Airlines, the Dallas Cowboys, tons of college football teams, big ones. And he's currently out on the Wendy's tour, speaking to a lot of corporate executives. So I don't know. There's a lot more I could say about him, but I like to keep the intro short. We will let Damon do the talking, but I'm excited to welcome the one and only Damon West to Last in Line Podcast. Damon West, it has happened. Finally, somebody pinched me because I must be dreaming. I've been tracking you down, man, and you are back. You are here on Last in Line Podcast. Welcome, sir.
Man, thanks a lot for having me, John. I know it's been kind of a moving target, but I mean, that's just my life, and I'm on the road so much. In fact, I'm doing this one from a hotel business center in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm traveling around with Wendy's this week on a tour all over America, bringing the coffee bean message to a lot of their district managers. And we're just hopping from one city to the next on their plane, man. So,
well, that's good, man. I hope the audience listens fast, because we're probably going to be talking fast, because we're gonna get this in under the gun and keeping to your schedule. But no, you're a moving target for valid and good reasons, and God's blessed you, man. And I've just sort of scratched the surface on your story and getting to know you. And man, it's been a wild ride for you. And we're going to let the audience, because I know a lot of my audience most likely knows who you are and maybe even has heard your story on other podcasts or a presentation that you made. We're going to do a little something a little off the beaten path to start out. I know you were a Division I college football quarterback, and you certainly did not hit the practice field throwing go routes right off the bat. So we're going to do a little warm up. We're going to get your cannon loose here. I got a couple lightning round kind of quick draw questions at you. Just simple one word answers. Okay. Just for a little fun, just a little lighten up, stretch them out a little. All right, here we go. This will tell you how light and shallow I am. Peanut butter or jelly?
Peanut butter.
Thank you. Dogs or cats?
Cats.
Okay. Even though Hershey's gonna take offense to that, but other than that,
yeah. Look, I love Hershey, and Hershey's my girl. But man, I've got 2 Bengal cats at home that don't get photographed or put on social media as much because I heard someone once tell me dogs have owners and cats have staff, and so I am just one of their staff, man. But Trixie and Lucy, these 2 Bengal cats I have, I love them. And cats, I mean, this is the first time I've ever had cats where they've grown on me, man, because you don't need to do anything with it. And I have this, John, and I don't have any kind of endorsement deal with Litter Robot, but I want to tell you this invention that's been made. It's a robot. It's a machine. The cats go into this thing. It's like almost like an igloo kind of deal. It looks like a round little ball they walk into. It's got litter in it. They do their business. They get out. 5 minutes later, the ball starts tilting and shifting, and it has a grate in there. And the grate will let the good litter go underneath it, and it catches all the bad stuff. And then it continues rolling, and it dumps the bad stuff into a tray at the bottom and then shifts back around, and the litter comes back into place. Once a week, you change the litter box, and it's fresh litter every day, 5 minutes after they walk out.
That's genius. That is genius. I wish I'd have thought of that, but no, I'm a dog guy. I don't dislike cats. I just don't have any. I will say we have some in the neighborhood, and I respect the heck out of their mission. And because I haven't seen a snake or a mouse in like 7 years. Okay, here we go. Steak or chicken? Steak or chicken?
Steak.
Country or rock?
Rock.
Cowboys or Texans?
Cowboys. Dak
I know that. I knew the answer to that. I just wanted to see if you were paying attention. Favorite podcast you've been on?
Ed Milet. 100%.
Ed, he meant to say aside from this one. I should have prefaced that and qualified as besides this one, he meant yours. No, I that's where I found you. And we didn't plan that segue.
I was going to ask you where you found me, man. So
that's where it was. Yeah, I was actually on sales calls in Waco, Texas, and I'm in medical sales, and I was out and about, and I was in Waco, happened to be there, and I literally sat in the parking lot of a customer for like 30 minutes and was very unproductive because I was captivated. And so thanks a lot for me not selling anything that day. But no, I was trapped in that podcast, man. I felt like I was in the audience, and that's how good it was. So Ed Milet's in a class of his own. So man, thanks for coming on. I know, like we said, you've been busy, and I've been trying to track you down. But I will say, being in sales has helped me be relentless and don't take no for an answer. So here we are. Man,
I love that, man. And I love the fact that you just reached out, man. I tell people all the time, never be afraid to ask the question. The only question you know the answer to is the one you don't ask. That's a no every single time. So you got to ask the question.
100%, man. And one of these days I'm going to see your deal in person. But man, your story, I mean, it goes without saying, you went from it was pretty much over to you're a pretty mighty overcomer. And then devastation, you went from devastation to deliverance and just kind of from being a wreck to being redeemed. And I want to hear from your perspective, how did you get to a point where you were a Division I college quarterback on, I don't know, pretty good path, it seemed like. Of course, you got injured. You went to work. You were in Congress working. You were a stockbroker in corporate America, doing pretty well, I'm guessing. How did you go from that to, I mean, you're on a track that has a story about being in prison, and I I don't get it. So how did that happen?
I think the easiest answer is substance abuse, because substance abuse, addiction, addiction doesn't care who you are, where you come from, who your mom and dad are, what side of the tracks you grew up on. If you are an addict and you get into your disease of addiction, it'll grab you and it'll never let you go until you find a program of recovery, or a program of recovery finds you. But it usually takes a big event for an addict to come to Jesus, so to speak. And, I got started in substance abuse at a young age. I was 10 when I started drinking, 12 when I smoked my first joint. Had a lot of character issues, but man, this is Texas, brother. And we love our Texas high school football. And I was the man. I was a 3-year starter for a 5A school, scholarship to play football at the University of North Texas, and became a Division I starting quarterback by the time I was 20. So I've always been kind of an overachiever, John. And that's one of the things that has been, the hallmark or the consistent thing in my story is that everything I do at full speed. And I try to do it to the best of my ability, which is great when you're doing something really good. But if you pick up something really bad and you start doing that full speed, Katie, bar the door. Because, man, I am going through life and I'm this high level performer. But in 2004, when I'm a stockbroker in Dallas, I get introduced to methamphetamine for the first time. Now, the other broker that introduces me to meth, he's a meth addict himself, and he has no clue that the guy he's going to introduce this drug to won't just smoke it a little bit. I'll smoke it a lot. In fact, I would become a slave to that drug. I'd give everything away for that drug. And I tell people give it away because that's what addicts do. We give things away. Addicts give up their goals to meet their behaviors. Normal people, focused people, successful people give up their behaviors to meet their goals.
Wow.
But as an addict, I gave everything away. My job, my home, my car, my savings account, my family, my tethering to God. I went from working on Wall Street to living on the streets of Dallas. Took about 18 months for the first hit of that meth. And but I'm homeless. And I become a criminal. I started doing petty crimes at first, property crimes. Then it advanced to a very serious crime of burglary. I started breaking into people's houses. And these burglaries, man, my victims, I stole way more than property from these people. I stole their sense of security, and I don't even know if they'll ever get that back. But after 3 years of committing property crimes against the people of Dallas, the Dallas SWAT team on July 30th, 2008, put an end to the uptown burglaries the day they arrested me. Or as I tell audience everywhere I go, John, July 30th, 2008 wasn't just the day I was arrested. It was the day I was rescued. My angels in life didn't have wings. They had assault rifles, shields, and helmets, and they came through the windows and they busted on the door to pull me out of the life that I was in. But I don't think I'd be here if it wasn't for them.
Yeah, I mean, they saved your life in a way, and you didn't even realize it at the time, because we all know where that path was heading that you were on, and so you go and you get put, you get charged, you get locked up, you're in prison, right? I would think you're in maximum security prison, correct? Yeah. You're in Huntsville.
Were you in Huntsville? No, I was in a prison in Beaumont. Texas has got over 100 prisons. So, okay. Texas has got a lot of prisons, but there's only about 11 or 12 units that can handle people that have a life sentence, because it's a level 5 penitentiary. Basically, level 5 is the highest, and it's the highest security level there is. Yeah. And the guys I live with on the life sentence building, most of these guys will never get out. They were aggravated life sentences. I was a non-aggravated life sentence because my crimes were nonviolent. No one was ever home during my crimes. I never saw my victims. They never saw me. No one got physically hurt. Yeah. No weapons were ever used. And because of that, I was able to make parole at a faster pace than someone that has a violent crime in Texas. Yeah. Violent criminals, anybody's classified as a violent criminal, a 3G offender, they have to do at least half their time before they even see a parole officer. So half of 60 is 30.
Yeah. Well, all right. So the life in prison, I mean, I know a little bit of your story, and you came from a good family, and it's not like you grew up in the streets, right? You had a nice, a good home and good people that loved you. And so prison was a little bit of a shell shock, I'm guessing, not your normal environment. So I guess take us through some of that. I know who you met there, and I know how the rest is sort of history after meeting him, but Take us through just sort of a day in the life of you, being afraid for your life, most likely, and then how you came to know the man who really spoke life into you and sort of changed your course of direction.
Yeah, and that man is named Mr. Jackson. But to know him, we have to back up a little bit because I met
Yep.
him in Dallas County Jail before I went to
Oh,
prison.
okay.
And I really just knew this man for a very brief window in 2009 after I was sentenced to life in prison while I was waiting for the prison bus to come pick me up. And we'll come back to him and the message that he taught me, the lesson he taught me. But a normal day in the life in prison, I'd get up about 4:15 in the morning. And I had a routine because the old timers will tell you when you get to prison, you got to do your time. You can't let your time do you. And what that means is you have to fill your day up with stuff to keep you busy. It doesn't matter what it is. Just keep busy, because if you don't keep your mind busy, then you will go crazy inside that place. You got to do your time. Don't let the time do you. And that's not just true in prison. That's true in life out here in the free world too. You've got to fill your day up with meaningful stuff, or otherwise you'll just sit around listless all the time and be shuffling through social media and scrolling news channels. You'll go crazy. Get up about 4:15. I'd have a cup of coffee. First of all, the coffee is there for a couple reasons. One, to wake me up, and two, to do its job. Because the next thing I'm doing, because prison is such a dynamic environment, I am going to try to use the bathroom before I go out of my cell that morning. Because when I leave my cell in a couple hours, I'm not coming back to that thing till the sun goes down. I'm staying outside that cell as long as possible. I want to get outside of those four walls. And the only bathroom I know for sure that is clean in that prison is the one that's in my cell. Because in a prison cell, it's about a 10 by 12 space. You've got a bunk bed, you've got a desk that's metal, everything's bolted to the ground, and you've got a toilet in there. So I get up, have my cup of coffee, make a bowl of oatmeal, go to the bathroom. After that's done, I start getting ready for my day, meditate, pray. And when they roll those doors for the first time in the morning, I'm shooting out those doors, and I've got everything I need for the day. I've got a change of clothes. I've got my stuff for rec. I've got my shower stuff. I've got books to read, newspapers to read, my rosary so I could pray with. And so I literally went out every day of my cell and just wore myself out. This is before I could even have a job, because the first 5 years I was in prison, I wasn't allowed to have any kind of job, wasn't allowed to go to any kind of school, because when you have a life sentence, they don't allow you to do certain things because they want you to get acclimated to prison. They want you to stay on your building as long as possible so you get the fence off your mind, because a lot of guys go in there and they think about escaping, which is normal for people being in prison to think about escaping. So for the first 5 years I was there, it was really up to me to decide what my days look like.
Mm-hmm.
After 5 years, I came up for a custody review, and they started giving me jobs as clerks in different parts of the unit. And my days were then filled up with meaningful purpose of going to work. I tell people all the time, one of the best rehabilitative programs, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, is they allow people to have a job. They allow inmates in there to go to work. Now, they don't pay you anything. It doesn't pay any money.
Mm-hmm.
But what it does pay you in is this habit that you form, this good habit of having a purpose every day. And you have other people that are relying on you every day, and you have to be somewhere on time, and you have a job to do. Now, imagine if you were a person in prison, which there are a lot of them like this, that they go to prison and they decide, I'm not going to go to work. I'm not going to do anything while I'm here. So for 20 years, they sit around watching Price is Right, Young and the Restless, Jerry Springer, and Judge Judy all day long. And then they get out of prison one day, and now they got to get a job. Now they wasted 20 years of creating that good habit of getting up and going to work every day because they sit around and watch soap operas and game shows.
Mm-hmm.
This is a bad thing, because when this happens, reality hits you so hard, and you could have been planning for your life outside. But honestly, John, to sum it all up, my entire time in prison was to prepare myself for the day that I would eventually walk out. I had no clue when I would walk out. I figured I was going to probably do at least 10 or 15 years inside of that prison before they let me make parole, not the 7 years and 3 months that I ended up getting out on.
Well, I mean, I don't know. The mindset is a terrible thing to waste, right? And you have the option and the choice. And it sounds like you said, to avoid going crazy, you had to stay busy. And I would guess that the readmission rates are high. I know they're higher, the guys that go back in once they get out, because of a little bit to your point of the habits that they do or don't form in prison, right? They get out and then it's a shell shock, right? Oh, I got to live. I got to work. I wasn't doing that. I was just kind of chilling. And now it's like, okay, I'm going to turn back to what I know. And then they end up back inside. So I guess what would you say is the hardest part of transition for inmates? And I'm asking you to speak for the hundreds of thousands of people who have been released from prison. But no, in your case, what was one of the hardest things?
In my case, one of the hardest things was adjusting to some of the social norms outside. And I say that in the sense that for 7 years and 3 months, I was gone from this world. When I went to prison, phones had buttons, for example. When I got out, there were iPhones and there's screens. You didn't have buttons anymore. There was a technology adjustment that I had to make there, but it wasn't so hard. It wasn't like I was gone for 30 years, like some guys are gone for. But the social etiquette, social norms. Look, man, in prison, you're very conscious. You're very spatially aware of what's going on around you, and you don't want to invade anybody's space. And if you do, on accident, say you bump into somebody or you nudge somebody, you own that. You say, hey, man, that's my bad. Sorry about that. Excuse me. That's the correct response in prison, or your head can get taken off.
Yeah.
But when you get out here in the free world, you've got people that aren't concerned about the kinds, and they don't understand being polite and proper etiquette. So, and you run into those people, those people bump into you and stuff like that. And the other norms, the social awkward behavior that I had was just getting out and communicating again. I was very uncomfortable in my own skin, meaning that I have this big thing hanging over my head that I'm on parole for the rest of my life. I just got out of a prison. So my thought was, if I beat you to it and tell you about it, you can't use it against me. I would literally introduce myself to people. Hey, I'm Damon West, just got out of prison. Let me tell you my story. And it's like people are like, whoa, this is like crazy, man. I wasn't expecting this, because you look at me and speak to me. I don't look or sound like a guy that has been in prison, because we have a stereotypical image of what someone that's incarcerated looks like. And I don't look like that. Kind of like Andy Dufresne in Shawshank. Andy Dufresne was someone that stuck out like a sore thumb. That was kind of like how I was in prison. And when I got out of prison, it was difficult to adjust, because I had to chill out and relax and just be okay with that. But I wasn't at first. It took a little while to adjust.
Well, when you went in as an addict and you came out not as one, I still say, look, I'm not going to try to say that I've been in your shoes or empathize with addicts, but I don't necessarily agree with someone saying I'm always an addict, because I disagree with that. You can be delivered from it. You can be, changed. But so how did you, when you came out, did you have any sort of temptation or thought? I mean, I know those thoughts can run rampant, and I know there's an enemy that likes to give you those thoughts sometimes. So how did you come out with that?
So here's the deal in my case, I can only speak for me. I learned that I got into a 12-step work recovery in prison called AA. And in AA, I learned a lot about living in the solution instead of living in the problem. And a lot of the people in AA, not all of them, we believe that, once an addict, always an addict, because it's the way you think. It has to do, addicts have a 3-part thought process. True addict, someone like me, you have a thought and it becomes an obsession, and then it becomes something physical. You put it in thought, obsession, physical. And the longer you have this thought inside your head, the more likely you are to act on it, because you're going to obsess over this thought. And your brain has this thing called euphoric recall. It means we like to remember the good parts, not the bad part. Your brain likes to repeat success. That's what brains do. And as an addict, I know that at some point in my life, this stuff can rear its head again if I'm not actively trying to do things to work in my program recovery. Now, the program recovery that I'm in, one of the core tenets of it is serving other people, service work. We try to find ways to serve other people. Another core tenet of it is to own all my behaviors. It's to become a good person again. It's to get rid of my fears, get rid of my resentments, man. These resentments are the things that really hold people back. Resentment, the opposite of resentment is forgiveness. And we have to try to find ways to forgive everybody for everything they've done, everything we resent. And we got to try to find the role that we play in all of our problems, because we have this saying in AA, whenever I'm disturbed, there's something wrong with me. Whenever I'm disturbed, there's something wrong with me. That means anything that bothers me, I play a role in that disturbance somewhere. And that's the part that I always have to find as an addict, because that's the one part I can control. That's the part I can fix. That's the part that I can change. Everything else is beyond my power to change it because I really just control 4 things: what I think, what I say, what I feel, and what I do.
Yeah.
So when I got out of prison, the first day I got out, I went and found an AA group in my area in Beaumont, where I live, Beaumont, Texas. And I found my sponsor and I started working the steps. And my sponsor told me, hey, look, I'll be your sponsor if you promise you'll go to any lengths to stay sober. And if you ever have a thought of drinking or doing drugs, you'll give me a call. And so I promised him that. And one of the things I learned about being in recovery, and I learned this in prison, is that addicts like me, people that are true addicts like me, we need more than just religion.
Hey, before we get back to the conversation here with our guest, I want to thank one of our sponsors, a new partner, Uncommon, which is a ministry that is equipping and empowering great men to become the husbands, the fathers, and leaders they were called to be. Go to uncommon.org. That's UNCOMMEN.org. Check out their content. Go to YouVersion, download their devotionals. Great team, great people, great men, and they're out there for you. They're out there with great content, and they're out there to encourage us to be the men we were called to be. So I want to thank TJ and his team at Uncommon. So now let's get back to the conversation with our great guest here at Last in Line.
And when I say that, I'm telling you that I think that prayer works. I am a Christian. If, for example, in AA, we get to pick a higher power. Everybody can pick whatever their higher power is because not all addicts are going to be Christians. We don't want to lose someone in addiction because they're not a Christian. But I'm going to tell you something that I learned from myself, and I saw other Christians going through that were true addicts. A true addict like me needs to have more than just religion, because here's the deal. In my faith, I'm Catholic. So if my faith, I go to my priest and I say, hey, Father, man, I'm having these urges, man. I really like jonesing for, a drink or a hit of this meth, and I can't shake them. What is my priest going to do? Or your pastor? What's your pastor going to do? Or someone that's Jewish, their rabbi, what are they going to tell you? Go pray, son. Just go pray and ask God to take away these desires, right? And that's a normal response for someone that has not been in the throes of addiction. But man, I'm telling you, as an addict, I've got these crazy thoughts in my head. I need someone around me that's been through this, that knows how to navigate this. So that's why we have a program recovery that runs parallel with our faith, right?
Yeah.
My sponsor, to tell you about the event that happened, it was December of 2016. It was 13 months after I walked out of prison. I'm at a Christmas party with my friend and his wife. Now, my friend's wife is having this glass of wine at this party, and this glass of wine smells so good, John. I could smell the grapes in this thing from 3 feet away. And I think to myself, I'm going to have a glass of that wine tonight. And as soon as I thought about it, it hit me. I was like, whoa, what just happened, man? I just had this crazy thought of like drinking. And man, I'm in prison because of drugs and alcohol, right? So, but I remembered what my sponsor said. Call me if you ever have a thought. So I told my friend and his wife, I left the party, went back in my car, called my sponsor. We'll call him Ray for the sake of anonymity. I said, Ray, man, something terrible just happened. And I told him. He started laughing at me. I'm like, dude, what are you laughing at, man? This isn't funny. This is serious. I almost had a glass of wine. He said, Damon, you're an addict. You're going to always have these thoughts. They're never going to go away because your brain likes to repeat success. He said, did you have some good times when you were out there drinking and drugging? He said, I sure did. I was like, yeah, I did. I had some good times. He said, good. He said, I did too. He said, so here's what I want you to do. He said, I want you to do this thing called playing the tape out all the way to the end. He said, I want you to imagine you're back in that party, and I want you to imagine you're having that glass of wine. He said, you drinking the wine? I said, yeah, I'm drinking the wine. He said, good. He said, now that you're drinking the wine, he said, what did you like to drink in the free world? What was your drink? What was your drink of choice? And I was like, bourbon. I love bourbon, John. I was a bourbon guy. Man, I could drink a fifth of bourbon every day. He said, good, drink bourbon, because that's what you really want to be drinking anyway. He said, now that we're drinking bourbon again, let's do some drugs. He said, what kind of drugs did you drink? What kind of drugs did you do when you were drinking bourbon? I was like, cocaine, because cocaine and bourbon go together so well. He said, that's right, they sure do. You got to remember, these two addicts talk to each other.
Yeah, I was going to say, y'all speaking the same language. Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, that's right, they sure do. He says, so snort some cocaine. He said, but now that we're doing cocaine, he said, Damon, that wasn't the drug of your choice. What was your drug of choice? What was that drug that did you in the end? What was that drug? And I was like, meth. He said, that's right, meth. He said, now, smoke your meth, because that's what the wine, the bourbon and the cocaine was trying to tell you in the first place, you want to do meth. So smoke your meth. You smoking it? I was like, yeah. All right, I'm smoking the meth. He said, good. He said, how's parole going now? Oh, man, I didn't even think about parole. He said, addicts, we don't think about that kind of stuff. We don't care about our families, our freedoms, our jobs, our careers. We give all that stuff away in pursuit of what makes us feel good because addiction is so selfish. He said, what did parole tell you was going to happen if you couldn't follow the rules of parole? I said, man, they told me I have to go back to prison for the rest of my life. No more chances, no third chance. He said, okay, then where are you now? I said, man, I'm on that prison bus and I'm chained up to another human being. I've just destroyed my life and my family for another time. He says, yes, you have. He said, Damon, those prison buses are long. Those prison bus rides are long trips. He said, you are going to be starving by the time you get to prison. He said, what was the worst meal they ever served you in prison? And I was like, pork noodle casserole. John, I don't even know what's in pork noodle casserole, brother. I do know. One time I found a pig ear in my pork noodle casserole, a hairy pig ear with a yellow tag in it, brother.
Come on.
He said, good. He said, when you get to the prison, throw your bags down in your cell, run down to that chow hall, and get you a big bowl of that pork noodle casserole and sit down at the table in the chow hall and wash it down with that glass of wine because that's where the glass of wine is going to take you tonight.
Hello.
He's like, you got it. He's like, you got it? I was like, yeah, I got it. He said, Damon, go back to the party, have a good time with your friends, and if you need me again, call me. Hung up on me.
Yeah.
Now, that's the best illustration I can give you, John, of why a program recovery for an addict, a real addict, works.
Yeah.
Because if they'll use these tools, if they'll go to their meetings, if they get a sponsor, they'll work the steps, then they have tools for any occasion that comes up.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, for years, I've parented a little bit like that. Like I tell my kids, play what you're about to do out and see where it goes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And instead of just living in the moment, because we all do that. And it sounds like you had to deal with a life full of almosts as an addict, as a former inmate. Like your life's full of, I almost took that sip, or I almost smoked that, I almost went down that street that I know I shouldn't go down, or so there's a lot of almosts out there that you have to deal with as well. So kind of transition us, if you can, into how you got, because you made a comment earlier, you just weren't comfortable in your own skin and probably had a little struggle with, you mentioned forgiveness, forgiving yourself also. How did you get, what was kind of the game changer for you getting comfortable in your own skin?
Yeah, I think it kind of happened after I got to a point where I found a way to be useful again. And when I found a way to be useful again, then I could let go of the guilt, the shame that I had against my own self. Forgiving myself, in life, we want to be forgiven for all the things we've done. That's just part of it. You want to make an apology, you want to be forgiven. But the reality is no one's required to accept your apology. You give an apology, that's required upon you. Now that does two things. It helps the other person move on past what you've done to them, the transgression in it. And it helps you move on too. You don't have to carry it around. No one wants to carry this stuff around, but we do it anyway. Mm-hmm. But I've made a lot of amends to a lot of people when I got out, because that's part of working the program recovery. And I got to a place where I have to forgive everybody, because at the end of the night, I literally pray to Christ, and I'm like, hey God, was I a good person today? What did I do to put back in the stream of life? Do I owe someone an apology? But I always ask this question at the end of every day: do I owe someone forgiveness? Because that forgiveness thing, that's where it's at. Because if I've got to be prepared to forgive everybody for everything they do against me, especially the ones that don't ask for it. Because if I don't do that, John, I'm taking yesterday's trash into tomorrow. Yeah. Now I've just cluttered up a new day with yesterday's trash. And I don't want to do that, man. I lived in a world for 33 years in my life where I carry this bag of trash around and I kick it around, and it's just a mess around. You're like Pigpen from the Peanuts, man. Yeah. Get this cloud of dust around me because I got all this baggage I'm carrying around. But I realized that I wasn't forgiving myself. And that was the hardest person I had to forgive, because look what I did, man. I made all these victims. Mm-hmm. My family was my biggest victims. My mom and my dad, man, they came to see me over 150 times when I was in prison. But when I got to a point where I was useful again and I was able to serve other people, and it didn't come from me, getting out there and speaking all over the world like I'm doing now. the speaking opportunities were few and far between when I first got out of prison. In fact, I had to have a cop or a judge go into schools with me because, I mean,
Yeah.
no one's just going to let you go into a school and speak when you just got out of prison. I mean, you can't just knock on the door and say, I just got out of the joint, I want to talk to your kids. I mean,
Right.
and they may lock you back up. But I was having a conversation with my sponsor. This goes back to the need for a program recovery for a guy like me that's an addict. My sponsor was talking to me one day, a couple months out of prison. And he comes up into the meeting room. He said, Damon, I need to talk to you about something really important. I'm like, what is it? He said, you're about to go back to prison. Man, that got my attention. That like I'm done talking. What are you saying, Ray? He said, here's why you're about to go back to prison, because you're stuck inside yourself. And he said, you can't live inside yourself and be working a program recovery at the same time. It's not possible. Because in a program recovery, we've learned how to be selfless. We have to become less selfish and become more selfless. And he said, you're stuck inside yourself. You have, this idea you want to go out and speak to kids and stuff like that. And I'm like, Rocco, no one wants me, man. Ray. I say, Ray, no one wants me, man. I can't go into these schools. I can't do anything because I'm an ex-con. He said, now you have the self-pity. He said, now you're really in trouble because you're feeling sorry for yourself. He said, Damon, he said, there's places that'll take you right now and you can go serve. You have to find ways to serve other people. I'm like, where can I go, Ray? Where can I serve as this ex-con? He said, you know what? Go to an old folks home. Go in. He called them old folks home. I know it's not the PC term.
Yeah. No.
But this is the guys in the 70s, man. You got to give him a break, man.
We're 80s kids. Don't worry about it. Yeah.
You can't cancel the guy because he says it. So anyway, so he says, go to an old folks home, any old folks home in the area, go to the front desk, ask them for a list of people who don't have any visitors, who don't ever get visitors. They're going to give you a list a mile long because so many people inside these places have been forgotten about by their families. He said, you know what it's like to live inside of an institution and be lonely. Spend your weekend this weekend going to visit people that hadn't had visitors in years and come back and tell me what your mindset is. So, John, I promised I'd go to any lengths to do it, to stay sober. I did it. And oh my God, did it change my life. Man, I went and spent the weekend with people that one guy hadn't had a visitor in 10 years, man. And I mean, these people just wanted to talk. They just wanted, at the core of being human, we have two things we want. We want to belong and we want to be loved. And when we don't belong and be loved, we turn into a worse version of ourselves, And so when I found out that I could belong in society again, I could be useful again, that's when my mindset started shifting. And I'm like, you know what? I can find ways to serve anywhere. It doesn't have to be on my terms. It just has to be where I need to be useful today. And I say the same prayer today that I've been praying for years since I got into recovery. I get up and I ask Christ for two things in the morning, John. I say, hey, God, put in front of me what you need me to do today for you, and let me recognize it when I see it, because I don't want to miss that. Yeah. Amen.
Wow.
Now your head's on a swivel, man. You're looking around all day. There's all kinds of people are coming in need everywhere you go. The three hardest words for people to say, I need help.
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, yeah, it changes for everybody, not just former inmates or addicts. It changes for everybody when the lens becomes about serving somebody. And that was the whole reason this podcast was even born, was from servant leadership perspective, what that really means to people who are doing it well, why it's important. Like this is perfect, because that's really what helps continue to save your life by the day and prevent some of those other patterns from repeating themselves. Well, I mean, so we all deal with certain things. I would imagine somebody that comes out of prison and then desires to have this impact, because you just, you're a go-getter, you're a self-starter, you're this hard charger guy, you don't know another gear, right? And so when you get to that point of wanting to make a difference, when did you, or how did you deal with the imposter syndrome of, wow, people are going to judge me. Like, what am I going to offer to these people, having just served this many years in prison, having come out of addiction? Like, what, obviously my testimony is impactful, but did you ever have to deal with that? Or did you just automatically think people want to hear what I have to say because they can learn from me?
Here's the thing that it was about. When I first got out and I started speaking, my idea of what I was speaking about was totally different than what I'm doing now. Like, for example, when I got out, I figured I was here to be a a warning about the dangers of drugs, the consequences of bad decisions, but an example of how someone can overcome any adversity. So when I first started speaking, John, I wasn't even telling the story of the coffee bean at first. I'm throwing all these different stories out there. I'm trying to figure out what sticks. I've got this mirror in my parents' spare bedroom where I lived for the first 2 years I'm out of prison. And every single night that I wasn't speaking somewhere, which was most nights, I was in front of that mirror practicing my presentation every single night. I'm getting in my reps, man. I'm becoming better at my craft. And as I got going through it, I threw in different stories, pulled out different stories. One day I'm out there, and that's where I would say that the imposter syndrome stuff comes in right out of the gate, because it's like, can I really do this? Can I really go into places and people want to listen to what I do? Because part of what I'm doing, John, is I'm going to tell them everything I've ever done wrong, every crime I've ever committed, and talk about the conversion that happened to me inside there and how I became a better version of me. But you're asking someone to sit through a lecture of the things you did wrong and open up and become totally vulnerable. That was hard at first. And I didn't know if that was even really something that people would want to listen to, but they did. They wanted to listen to it. And then one day I'm like, you know what? I'm going to throw the coffee bean out there. Let me see if this has any impact at all. You're like, it had on me, because when I first heard the story of the coffee bean, I got it. Carrot, egg, coffee bean. I have 3 choices. I threw it out there. First time I threw it out there, people were like, whoa, what was that? They'd never heard that before. And then I started doing it more and more and more. Then I got the real confirmation when I spoke to Dabo's team in August of 2017 and shared the coffee bean with Dabo's team. And Dabo came up to me afterwards. He said, Damon, I'm stealing the coffee bean from you. He said, man, that's incredible. I've never heard that before. Never even anybody's ever said that before. And that's when I realized in 2017, after speaking to Dabo's team and speaking to some of the college football programs, I'm sitting on something, John, that is new in the world of speaking. Like, new in the sense that a lot of ideas are recycled and repackaged in the world of speaking. A lot of lessons, a lot of morals that people learn, a lot of ideas, servant leadership. But no one on the planet is coming out with this story about the coffee bean. And no one on the planet has a story of applying a principle like that in the world that I just got out of in prison. And I realized that those two things together were going to take off. Now, maybe it wouldn't be at the pace that I wanted it to be, but that's about being obedient, waiting for God to say, hey, look, man, this door is going to open for you at this time. Right. But I realized that I was sitting on something, man. And if I would just be obedient and do what I'm here to do, then things are going to take off. But being obedient means that every day I have to get up looking for ways to serve other people. That's the secret sauce. That's what's going on in my life. And in my life, I have to be willing to be useful every day, be willing to serve, be willing to be there for the needs of other people. If I'm willing to meet the needs of other people, my needs get met too. Yeah. That's the thing about my prayer in the morning. I'm looking for ways. If I do what Christ needs me to do for him, he's always taking care of my needs too. Not my wants, but my needs. Needs and wants that's 2 different presentations, man. That's not even my presentation. Yeah. When I'm walking out of prison, and I don't really tell a lot of people this story. I mean, if I'm in front of a spiritual audience, I'll tell it. But I mean, you're a believer. I'm a believer. So I'm going to tell you the story. Walking out of prison, the day I walk out, November 16, 2015, I get a couple steps out of the prison, and my parents are waiting there in the parking lot, this gravel parking lot. They've been waiting for me for 7 years and 3 months and 18 days to walk out that gate. I've been waiting to walk out, but I stopped a couple steps out of prison. And I turn around because God's talking to me. God is telling me, Damon, turn around. So I turn around. And I'm sure my parents are wondering, like, why has he stopped? Did he forget something? But what's going on in my head, and this is the voice of God saying, Damon, I want you to remember what this place looks like. Because here's the deal. I put you through all of this for a reason. You are going to work for me now. And as long as you work for me, and this is about me, you're going to have one of the most incredible lives that any human's ever had. But the minute it becomes about you, this is where you're coming back to. So let's get to work. And then boom, I took off running from my parents. That's what I heard on the way out of prison, brother. And that's been my direction every day. It's like, this can't be about me. It's got to be about him, about what he needs me to do.
Well, okay. So I love that. And you can come back anytime and start sharing stuff like that. But I got to ask you, what's the downside to saying that in your normal presentations of people who may not be believers? If we're called to be the coffee bean in a spiritual sense and impact those who may not know him, what's the downside to presenting that? Because that's a powerful part of the story, and it's not just a small part of the story. So what is there a downside to presenting that to people who may not be believers?
I think it's the understanding that, like, I want people to all hear the message. I want people to all, in life, I have found that not everybody believes the same way you and I do.
100%.
And in order to properly communicate, one of the main tenets of communication, everybody wants to feel like they've been heard. And when you feel like you've been heard, then you feel like you're part of something bigger, you're part of a team. And what I hear from people is that, hey, I want to hear a message about something, this message that you're going to share with me. I don't necessarily want you to insert your religion or your faith into it. Now, and that's fine. I can't tell my story without talking about what God did in my life. And I always do. I talk about my mom, talking about the footprints in the sand, stuff like that. But I'm respectful of the idea that if I can package this the right way, it'll be more impactful to more people. Yeah. Now, I'll throw language in there that other believers pick up, When I say, for example, that I had to die to myself to become the man I am today, right? If you're a believer, you pick up on that, right? And if you're not, that's a weird way of saying that, he died. But, the way, the idea, like, let's go even deeper. Mr. Jackson, man, Mr. Jackson, his name isn't Mr. Jackson. In fact, till very recently, I didn't know who he was. I didn't know his real name. The only name I knew him by was Muhammad, because when these guys go to prison and they convert to Islam, they give up their government names. No, my government name is Damon West. Your name is John Shibley. And so his name, I don't know what his name was. He only went by Muhammad when I met him in Dallas County Jail. Now, when I got out of prison, I went to Dallas County Jail looking for my friend Muhammad. Dallas County Jail was like, we need a name or a birthday. We need a vital statistic to find this guy. So in absence of that, I wasn't about to go around. I live in the South, brother. Same South you live in. I'm not going to go around telling people Muhammad told me this, Muhammad told me that.
Sure.
Kind of for the same reason we're talking about right now, of why I'm not going to insert everything about my faith into one presentation. Mm-hmm. Because if I go around telling people Muhammad told me this, Muhammad told me that, there's a lot of people that are going to shut down and don't want to hear what this Muslim guy told me in Dallas County Jail. Mm-hmm. So it works both ways. You got to figure out what the right balance is and something like that. Corporate audiences, there's a lot of corporate audiences that will tell you, we don't want it heavy on faith. I got people with a lot of different faiths here. School audiences, where there's separation of church and state, you have to be cognizant of that. You have to be respectful of what people want in their presentation. But if someone tells me, hey, we are a faith-filled audience, we are a company of believers, then I'll probably talk 10 minutes longer because I got way more stories about that.
Yeah, that's a great moment of your life where you stopped. Like, that's just, to me, that was pivotal. And I don't think just because I'm a believer was that pivotal. I think that, now maybe it wouldn't have resonated the same and I might have been like scratching my head if I wasn't, but that to me is a huge part, because you were cognizant, you were getting a message, and people, secular calls it a hunch or a gut feeling, or I had this, something talking to me. But no, that's impressive. I like that. And it did impact your direction going forward. When it comes to your message about the coffee bean, and I'm going to leave it up to you, but you could give us maybe a 20,000 foot kind of just synopsis of that, or we can just say, you know what, you're out of luck, audience, go get the book. A lot of my audience will know because they know who you are, but let's make it a twofold question. Kind of tell us what you're comfortable telling us about it. And then what part of that message really, really resonates the most? Is there a common thread of that concept that you're hearing the similar feedback on?
Yeah. So the story of the coffee bean is basically this in a nutshell. A pot of boiling water, we'll call it life. You have three choices of how you respond to the pot of boiling water called life. You can be like a carrot that turns soft. The carrot goes in hard, but the water makes it soft. You can be like an egg that becomes hardened. The egg goes in with a soft liquid core. It's our hearts. Our hearts are malleable when we're younger, but through life, some people can become hardened like the egg, and their hearts become hard. Or you can choose to be like the coffee bean, because the coffee bean changes the pot of boiling water into a pot of coffee. It's the only thing that can change the water, because everything else is changed by the water. The carrots are changed by the water. The eggs are changed by the water. But the coffee bean is the only thing that can change water because it is the change agent. Now, what do I see more than anything else out there? Eggs. Because the egg is the natural evolution of any human being inside of any difficult situation they're in. And the egg is where people usually go to when adversity hits. And the reality is we're all going to be the carrot at sometimes. We're all going to be the egg at other times. But the trick is to not stay sad, not stay mad, and to pull out of that and change our mindsets to a mindset of gratitude and be like the coffee bean. Choose to be like the coffee bean.
Yeah. Yeah. Not perfect. And it is very, intuitive message. It's straightforward. We all can get that. That's one of the great things is anybody can understand your message, but no one's heard it put that way. And that's, I believe, part, and your delivery is, those reps paid off, in your parents' spare bedroom. Like your delivery is solid. It's amazing and it captivates people. But they can digest it. Well, I mean, so it's obviously rewarding to see the fruits of your service. Like I think you're out serving, you're doing it about more than just yourself. Clearly, it's having an impact. I mean, I think, tell me if I'm wrong, but no book sales, no money, no speaking. I mean, no money for speaking. You would almost do this for free if I'm being, let's be realistic, but I'm saying you would, if people always ask you if money wasn't an issue, what would you do? That's how you decide what you're really passionate about. I think you would still be doing this.
So to wrap this up, I got a great analogy for you on that. Not a written analogy, but it was something that happens in my life. I do get paid to speak, and I have a great life because of it, and I'm able to be useful and helpful to other people and share with them a message that helps them. But my favorite place to speak is one that I don't get paid a dime to go into. There's no money that changes hands when I go into a prison. Prisons are my favorite place to go into, and I try to go into as many as I can. And if I could have something in life, I would love to get to a point where I make enough money that I could peel back some of the speaking engagements that I do for a fee and do some other ones in prisons for free, do more prison stuff. And I think that's where I'll get to later in life, where I spend more of my time in prison than out of prison. Because in a prison, every man or woman that's listening to that presentation, 100% of them are locked in because they want what I've got. And when you want what someone's got, then you'll do what they did to get there. Or maybe you'll listen to what they did. But I get to deliver hope inside of a place where there's no hope. I'm a smuggler of hope.
That's good.
That's where it's at, brother.
That's good. Give me the website. Give me where. Obviously, we can buy the books wherever. You've got multiple books. Tell us what they are, and then give us your website, and we'll let you go.
DamonWest.org, at DamonWest7 on Instagram and Twitter. And the books can be found anywhere books are sold. Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, wherever. The Change Agent, the Coffee Bean for Kids, the Locker Room. And coming up in February, How to Be a Coffee Bean with John Gordon. The last book in the series with John Gordon.
Awesome. And you're going to be doing some coaching, I think, with some masterminds, if I'm not mistaken. Is that coming up?
Oh, yeah. I try to do them anytime I get a chance to.
All right. Well, hey, audience, we love it. Thank you, Damon. He's been Damon West. We've been Last in Line. Be blessed.
Make your escape.